Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the day after butt edge on Fox News. I gotta apologize from the top, man. This old salty dog, this old Captain Whitebread, he has trouble with some of these names. So if I slip up, it may or may not be on purpose, but I do have trouble with these names. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, we're talking about the Fox News town hall last night, Sunday night, with the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, Get Shorty as I sometimes call him, Mayor Buttget. He was on Fox News, and I guess by most accounts had a successful town hall meeting. All these Democrats, with the exception of maybe Elizabeth Warren, we'll talk about her in a moment, have decided that they're going to go on to Fox News and seek, I guess, to expand their voter base. But this is coming to you from NBC News. Butt Edge attacks Fox News host at Fox News town hall. Pete Buttigieg used a nationally televised Fox News town hall on Sunday night to blast a pair of the network's most prominent hosts. Butt Edge, who came under fire from progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Progressive wing? Is there any other wing of the Democratic Party? Please step forward. I don't think there is any other wing. There's just varying degrees of that same wing. But a progressive wing of the Democratic Party, for taking part in the Fox News event in Claremont, New Hampshire, took direct aim at the network, watched closely by President Donald Trump and other conservatives. Well, President Trump apparently watches all of them. I mean, he responds to criticism and accolades from all different networks. So yes, he watches Fox News, and yes, Fox and Friends appears to be his favorite show, but can you really blame the guy? But he certainly watches others, as you can tell by some of his comments. Back to the article here. A lot of people, this is what Butt Edge is saying. A lot of people in my party were critical of me doing this, talking about the town hall, and I get where that's coming from. I don't. But especially when you see that what goes on with some of the opinion hosts on this network, Buttget told Fox News Chris Wallace. So I guess that's unlike the rational opinion people that are on MSNBC and CNN, like Rachel Maddow and Don the Lemon and those kind of people on CNN. I mean, I guess they're very calm and considerate and dispassionate people. But the people on Fox, they're evil incarnate. But Buttget cited Tucker Carlson. Oh, now there's an evil guy. There's a guy that he's got to be stopped, Tucker Carlson, saying immigrants make America dirty. Now, did Tucker really say that? I think they're distorting it. And Laura Ingraham comparing detention centers with children in cages to summer camps. What children in cages? They're still not in cages, by the way. Wallace did not address Buttget's attacks on the two hosts. Well, let me just tell you flat out. I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched pieces of it, but Chris Wallace was cowardly. He didn't challenge Buttget on much of anything, especially when they were attacking his colleagues. Do you think for 1 minute that a conservative could go on, for instance, MSNBC and say something negative about any of their people, and there's plenty negative to say without somebody defending them? I mean, Morning Joe Scarborough, supposedly conservative guy, he defends his colleagues at every chance, even when they're absolutely lying and ridiculous. But let's move on. This is my psychic sidekick, Billy Bob Bass, in case you're new to the show. He keeps me kind of honed in. He's got a Twitter handle. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks. But he kind of keeps me back on track because he tells me I wander from time to time to get back to the article. So I appreciate it, Billy Bob. See, that some of us are sicker than others. I talk to the fishes. But Carlson and Ingraham both host primetime shows on Fox News and have stirred controversy with their comments. Controversy to who? Carlson in December. Now, this is what they're citing Carlson as saying, and I watch his show on a pretty regular basis. I tape it if I can't watch it live and watch it. I try to watch it pretty much every night. But Carlson in December said allowing in immigrants makes our own country poor, dirtier, and more divided. He did not actually say it that way, but we'll get to that in a minute. Ingram and June, and I have to admit, I don't watch Laura as much. I like Laura. I listen to her show on the radio more than I watch her show on TV, mainly because by the time she comes on, not only am I a bit tired, but they've kind of covered everything. And I guess that's just the nature of the time slot she has. But Ingram and June said migrant children detention centers were essentially summer camps. Notice how they're quoting these people, but they leave out illegal immigration or illegal aliens or illegal migrants, because I guarantee you, if you go back and see it, Tucker talks about illegal all the time, and so does Ms. Ingram. Now, why would they leave that out on these quotes, so-called quotes? It's because they being the powers that be behind these articles, they don't want the term illegal immigrants to be uttered. They don't want the truth to come out. But this is a flat out lie. At least at the very least, it's a distortion. I think about it's really kind of a lie. What Tucker Carlson, and go check it out yourself. You can take my word for it. You sure could, but you don't have to. You can Google it. But remember what I tell you, Google is kind of the devil. Let me take a little refreshment. But Tucker Carlson was basically saying, and I'm sure I'll botch it up a little bit, but he was basically saying that we're not obligated to take on the poorest of the poor and all that. And he asked, especially when it makes our country poorer, dirtier, and what was the other part? And more divided. It's true. It's absolutely true. And this is not saying that the people who are coming here are dirty people, but they're living in squalor for the most part. They're leaving squalor, bringing squalor with them. All you got to do is look at any of our major cities, and there is a heavy illegal immigrant population that is essentially homeless on the street. And they don't have a big skill set. It's not like a lot of the people in these caravans have a gigantic skill set for the type of jobs we have in America. Yes, they can pick fruit and they can do construction, menial labor, but many of them don't even have the trade skills necessary for construction either. And I know that for a fact because I used to be involved in construction quite a bit. But in this thing with Ingram, Laura Ingram, as I say, I didn't see the show that she mentioned this, but I've gone back and looked at the exact quote. She was talking about some of the detention centers were like summer camps. Bud Edge kind of ridiculed her for this. But what she was saying, if you look at it, they have classrooms, they go on field trips to museums, they have all kind of things. So this idea that we're somehow locking people up in cages and putting them in essentially in some type of dog kennel is totally ludicrous and an outright lie. And the people that write these articles know that because many of them have been there. There's a reason, back to the article, Butt Getz said, there's a reason anybody has to swallow hard and think twice before participating in this media ecosystem. I guess he's talking about the Fox News channel. But I also believe that even though some of those hosts are not always there in good faith, I guess he's talking about like Sean Hannity, and I think a lot of people tune into this network who do in good faith. Now, what in the heck does that really mean? So he's saying that the people on Fox aren't there in good faith. I guess he's saying they're lying or they have an agenda, and some of them may. But the people that tune in don't. So they tune in to watch liars and scoundrels. And I mean, what does he really mean? It sounds like he's insulting not only the Fox anchors, but the people that watch them. But hey, that's just my opinion. He goes on to say, and there's a lot of Americans who my party, talking about the Democratic Party, blame if they're ignoring our message because they will never hear it if we don't go on and talk about it. Now, in this case, I would agree with Mr. Butt Edge, or however you say his name. It sounds kind of reasonable that you do need to talk. If you're going to run for president, you should talk to all the people of America, not just those that are in your echo chamber. But he continues and goes on to say, we have to find people where they are, not change our values, but update our vocabulary so that we are truly connecting with Americans coast to coast. Translation? He's saying that we have to enlighten the non-believers, and we have to change our language, not so that we can fool them into voting for us. Because he knows, he's no dummy. He knows that the ideas he's espousing, once you take a real critical look at them, are not American values, certainly not right of center or center values. They're hardcore left of center values, but he believes that if you can just say it in a quiet, calm tone, you can just say, for instance, you're a better Christian than Vice President Pence, that if you say it mildly and quietly, it'll have staying power and it'll mean something. But it says here, Buttigieg was well received by the Fox News town hall audience, and his comments prompted repeated enthusiastic applause. Exactly what does that mean? Are they supposed to, does he really, now first of all, we don't know who all was in that audience, but let's just assume that it were MAGA hat wearing Trump type supporters, that they think all of us knuckle draggers that watch Fox News are. Then would they expect him to just boo the dude? Would they really expect him to just shout him down and everything else? That's not what conservatives do. Conservatives are not afraid to hear other opinions, and they are polite. Now, I think some of that audience was probably predetermined, preordained, and packed in Buttigieg's favor. But even if it weren't, it's not like you're going to go on to some audience that just boos you like you're going on Bill Maher's show or something. Conservatives are generally polite, and beyond that, they are actually open-minded, most are, to listen to other opinions, unlike the left, that if you don't drink their Kool-Aid 100%, then you are evil incarnate and persona non grata. Fancy words from Hawthorne this morning, right? He faced criticism, talking about Buttigieg, the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, from some on the left for participating in the town hall, particularly after Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, turned down an invite from Fox. Miss Warren, she stood her ground, saying last week that she was a hard pass. In other words, hell no, on doing an event on the network, Fox Network, which she slammed as a hate-for-profit racket that gives megaphone to racists and conspirators. So I'd ask Pocahontas, this Liawapa, the whitest woman in America, by the way, not me that says that, she got paperwork. She literally has documentation saying that she is the whitest woman on the planet. But so is Buttigieg now a racist? Is he a racist conspiratist because he went on Fox News? I guess if Elizabeth Warren is to be believed, he is. So, by the way, then would be Bernie Sanders and the gal that announced global warming was the #1 priority in a blizzard. I can't remember her name right now. Heidi was, no, not her. Anyway, you know who I'm talking about. There's so many people running for president on the Democratic side. It is really hard to keep up with. Hard to believe that at Fox, this is what President Trump tweeted about all this. He said, hard to believe that at Fox News is wasting airtime on Mayor Pete, as Chris Wallace likes to call him. Fox is moving more and more to the wrong side in covering the Dems, Trump said. Is he right? I think he's got a point there. Fox seems to be trying to take their fair and balanced statement a little bit too far. It's becoming more and more clear to me every day that your only alternative, really, if you want to get the hardcore truth, what I say, the unvarnished truth, scrub all this old varnish like off this desk and get to the hardwood, is going to be places like JMT. You're going to have to tune in to places like Citizens for Trump, Deplorable Resistance, Media Measures, John Martin Talks Facebook page. If you hadn't already, go like it directly and share it with us. You're going to have to do that in order to get any kind of straightforward talk, especially from any kind of right of center. You're going to have to tune in to shows like JMT. And that's why I'm determined every day, even though I'm here in my bunker at home right now, I'm determined every day, and I'm fighting as hard as I can to get this word out, because we need to get it out. But moments after the town hall ended, veteran Fox News journalist Brett Hume slammed Trump for barely facing interviews from reporters like Wallace, while lauding Buttigieg for doing so. Wait just a minute, Brett. And I like Brett Hume, but you're way, way off base here. Donald Trump may or may not hold enough regular press conferences for you. But unlike most presidents, he will take questions in the oddest of places and will literally stand there and answer them for a long time, even for people who are opposed to him, probably to his detriment. But anytime he's out in public, he takes questions. And I just don't know of a president. He's done more interviews on left-leaning liberal mainstream media, basically socialist rat stink rags than he's done with anything like Breitbart or any of that. He's only done, I think, like one with them, and he's done dozens with. He's even done quite a few interviews with the New York Times. So I don't know where Mr. Hume is coming to this. But Hume tweeted, "I'll say this for Buttigieg. He's willing to be questioned by Chris Wallace, something you've barely done since you've been president." Now, isn't it a bit ironic, or at least disingenuous, that the president, following Buttigieg's town hall, did an hour-long interview on Fox News? I mean, he had an hour-long interview. What president gives hour-long interviews? President Trump does quite frequently. So I don't know where Hume is coming from on this. I guess maybe the president hasn't talked to him directly enough. I don't know. But we'll move on. Just gets me how, I guess Buttigieg is the flavor of the day right now. But he's only polling at like just above anyone else kind of thing. But all the white dudes and the young dude are polling ahead of everybody. We're going to talk about the leading poller right now in Mr. Joe Biden himself, man. And this is kind of an opinion piece from The Atlantic. Joe Biden's bet that 2016 didn't change anything. In many ways, this according to The Atlantic, in many ways he's running the same kind of campaign he would have in a pre-Trump, pre-Sanders era. And era, not error, but era. And it kind of makes a point here, I think, that I agree with, actually. But Philadelphia, in the new rules of politics, post-2016 were to hold up, the official launch rally of Joe Biden held here on Saturday would mean that he is in trouble. The crowd wasn't huge, I think about 6,000 they're saying, was largely white and older, and for the most part only really got into it when he mentioned Barack Obama or Donald Trump. Well, one thing we know about Biden, and some people may like this, he's no Trump. He's no Trump. He vows in this article later on, no one's going to campaign harder than he is. Well, I can tell you one guy that's going to campaign harder than all of y'all because he's already proven it. And that is none other than DJT. President Donald J. Trump is the hardest working candidate I have ever seen. And love him or hate him, you got to admire his ability to get out there. Yet Biden's high and getting higher poll numbers, the early fundraising success that he's surprised even his own aides, and the enthusiastic responses I heard from supporters who came out on a hot afternoon to see him don't show a candidate in much trouble at all, according to this writer. Now, I tell him he's being a bit unfair, isn't he? Give old Biden a chance. He can mess this thing up. He's done it before. He's been the front runner before, and every time he's messed it up. So I think they're being a bit unfair to Biden. You give him a chance. He can screw this thing up, man. He can do it. I got faith in him. Biden's campaign is a bet, I don't know if it's a good one, that in the 4 years since Trump launched his campaign, the country hasn't changed, the Democratic Party hasn't changed, and politics hasn't changed. Well, all of that is true in a sense. They've all changed. The writer's got a great point here because he says the last 4 years since Trump launched his campaign, the country hasn't changed. Well, the country in many ways is more divided. I would grant you that. And Biden is trying to run as the unifier while he's always trying to divide people. Because that won't work, by the way, in the Democratic Party because their whole strategy for at least the last 2 decades has been to divide and conquer. They're not about unifying anybody. They're about getting everybody pissed off, then, quote, unifying them behind a common boogeyman. So the Democratic Party, if it weren't for people being pissed off, would not exist at all. And that explains old Bernie a little bit. But it says, here going to break this down a bit, the Democratic Party hasn't changed. Well, good Lord, we know that's a fact. The Democratic Party has moved so far to the left that if they turn left any further, I mean, look at these 2020 people that are running. Someone will come out with something, and the next thing somebody tries to get further to the left of them. The only people turning left more than the Democratic candidates for president are NASCAR drivers. And I don't think too many of them are for the Democrats, but hey, I could be wrong. But he says here, and politics hadn't changed. Of course, politics have changed dramatically. What we're doing right now on JMT, this social media that empowers you to go beyond or around the mainstream lines, fake swamp rat media and get the real truth out there, has changed everything. And so I'm just grateful to be a part of that. Grateful for the many supporters we have. Hang in there with us. We're growing every day. I appreciate it very much, your support. But Trump and Bernie Sanders were the breakout candidates of the last presidential election, according to this article. But unlike most of the other people running, Biden and his aides haven't adjusted to that reality because they don't accept that is the reality. And first I'd ask you about Bernie. Because you know, if I'd have read this right after 2016, I would have agreed wholeheartedly with this article that Bernie represented a breakout. But now that I've studied it a bit and I'm looking at how his numbers are dropping now and the things that Bernie did after when he basically went back into the establishment and kowtowed to Hillary and everything else, and how he did with Ocasio-Cortez, where he didn't support her, by the way, when she first ran, and then jumped on her bandwagon when she actually won. Bernie has proved to be more of an establishment guy than I guarantee you most of his supporters believe. I've been on to him for a while, and apparently a lot of his supporters are believing that too, because they're dropping him quickly, especially young people. They're not necessarily turning to Biden. It's unclear where they're turning, but it is clear that they are not feeling the burn. So I'm not so sure that Bernie is still this breakout guy. I don't know that he ever was. Biden's message is very Trump aware, and this is what the former vice president said. I want to make sure. This is what Biden said. First, let me back up. Slow down. Take a little sip. Calm down. I had a great weekend. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But according to the writer, Biden's message is very Trump aware. If you'd asked me a few years ago if our democracy was at stake, I would have smiled and laughed a little bit, said Biden. He went on to say, no more. The threat is to this nation, to our democracy. It is real, it is clear, it is present. To me, Mr. Biden, the threat to our nation, our way up now, you may be wanting to do away with the republic, the great experiment we call the United States of America. You, like many Democrats, may find that old Constitution in the way, and we got a story about that coming up in just a moment. But make no mistake, the threat to our republic, as Benjamin Franklin said, we gave you a republic if you can keep it, is people like you, Mr. Biden, who should know better, but have turned to the dark side and the hardcore left of the Democratic Party. Make no mistake, Mr. Biden is about as progressive as they get. I'll defend him and his progressive bona fides anytime. Think about that. But Joe Biden, you and your ilk are the problem, because you should be defending the old JFK party, the Democratic Party that I kind of cut my teeth in. You should be about that and saving it and taking it back from these yahoos. But instead, you're jumping right in the middle of them. So if there's a danger to this republic, it is people like you who know better, sir, and still, just for power's sake, are leading us astray. According to the article here, it says he's not getting into Sanders-style proposals such as Medicare for all. Biden is a socialist, man. He's as socialist as any of them. Like I say, I will defend. That's one area I will defend you, Joe. You are as socialist as any of them. But Cedric Richmond, the Louisiana congressman and former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, told me, talking about the writer here, the crowd size wasn't an indicator, because they've been chastising Biden a little bit on his crowd, with Biden more focused on getting his message out to TV audience on Saturday. Trump is the one, according to Mr. Richmond, who cares about crowd sizes. Well, first of all, let me just say, this is something they don't seem to get. President Trump is leading a movement. The MAGA agenda, America first, keep America great, make America great, keep it great. It's a movement. And President Trump even acknowledges this. It is bigger than even he is. He's tapped into it. Now, I'm giving a lot of the credit to President Trump for establishing this movement, but he is a part of the movement. And it is a movement, not just a political campaign. And they just don't seem to get it. And as far as TV, who's on TV more than President Trump? He's literally on 24/7. Not always good, right? I mean, as far as they're negative sometimes on Trump, not sometimes, about 99% of the time. Even Fox is about 50-50 according to some of the latest statistics that have come out. But Trump is all about being on TV. He's got 53 million Twitter followers, by the way. I mean, he is very modern when it comes to campaigning. But the feminist writer Jill Filipovic I don't pretend to know who she is, but apparently her opinion matters. She did a New York Times op-ed where she asked the question, does anyone actually want Joe Biden to be president? Man, that is a great question and a very interesting and very deep question. I don't think too many people actually want Joe Biden to be president. Now, you may say that, well, he's polling at the top of everybody else. Yeah, but that doesn't mean they actually want him to be president. Part of that is name recognition, and a big part of it is they want to beat Trump at any cost group. And there's a mixture of people that actually do think that Biden represents a shift back to the center for the Democratic Party. I don't think you're right about that, but I do think that people think that that is right. But it is a good question. I would be very interested to see some type of data that showed how many people that Biden would be, take everybody out. Would Biden be your first choice to be the next president? Even if Trump wasn't in there, I don't think he would be on people's top 10 list, really. But the article goes on to say, it's early days yet in the Democratic primary, but Biden's campaign is discussed in some circles as a self-fulfilling prophecy that he will win the Democratic nomination simply because he appears the likeliest to win the nomination, that he will beat Trump simply because everyone else is talking about how electable he is, not because voters are actually excited about him or the specifics of what he's running on. Now, hey, we heard similar things about somebody else, didn't we? Maybe Hillary Clinton, inevitability, all that kind of stuff, elect the greatest person that ever run in history. But there were people that actually wanted Hillary to be president. There are people for various reasons, some of them diehard Clinton supporters, a lot of them to break that, quote, glass ceiling and have the first woman president. That was a big deal. Now, there were actually women that voted for just because they didn't want a woman president, which is an interesting thing we don't have time to get into now, but maybe another time, depending on who comes forward in the 2020 elections here. But I think Hillary had by far more people that actually wanted her to be president than Biden. I have a hard, I mean, his poll numbers are up in the 30s, I think. I have a hard time believing that 30% or better of the Democrats actually want Joe Biden to be president. Now, do they want him over Trump? Sure. But they actually want him to be president? I don't think so. During his remarks on Saturday, Biden took some digs at Trump, which drew some of the more enthusiastic responses from the crowd, in a bit calling on his work with Obama. So he's channeling Obama to get cheers. Can't really blame him for that. And the economic recovery after the 2008 collapse, he said the current that is owed to the current president, that this mantra they have now, the left has, that somehow President Trump is taking advantage of the Obama recovery. See, now, I've said this before, but if I say it, you know what I say, it bears repeating. I actually hope Obama's right. I hope Obama is 100% responsible for the upturn in the economy. You know, so don't turn away yet. Just hang on, I'll explain it. The reason is because if Obama, after being out of office for 2 whole years and Trump in office for over 2 years now, if that is the recipe for a great economy, then think how great it'll be if Obama's right and once he's out of office for 8 full years. Man, the economy at the end of the second Trump term will be like, it'd be huge. I don't know how else to describe it. So if Obama's right, man, hold on. The best is yet to come. But Biden goes on to say this mantra that you hear from the left all the time, that Trump inherited an economy that was given to him by the Biden administration, just like he's inherited everything else in his life. And he's in the process of squandering that too. Wow. I mean, this is coming from a man in Joe Biden that's never held a regular job. What is it with these Democrats that basically think their career should be politics? I mean, you talk about, there are some on the Republican side too, so don't misunderstand me. But these Democrats, I mean, people like the two that are leading the Democratic ticket right now, 2 old white dudes, I hate to tell you that, but Bernie Sanders in second and Biden in increasingly in first place. Not only are they old white dudes, but they have nothing else in common. Neither one of them ever held a real job. Their only steady paycheck has come from us, the taxpayers. And they're going to bash Trump. I keep hearing this thing all the time. I haven't talked about this lately, but I'm going to talk about it now. That President Trump, you know, they discuss whether he started with a silver spoon in his mouth and all that. Well, clearly, President Trump started out with some advantages. He came from a pretty well-to-do family. And there's been talk about, you know, that he got like $1 million from his dad to start his business, that he got $100,000. Let's just say that they're right. And some people say he got $10 million. Well, let's just use the largest figure, $10 million. Let me just tell you, if you take $10 million, you know what they say? Have you ever heard this before? How do you start out with a small fortune? You start with a big one. If you take $10 million and turn it into $1 billion, let alone 4, 8, or 10, or whatever it is, but let's just use the most drastic figures. He got 10 million and he turned it into $1 billion. Not too many people ever do that. Most people get 10 million, and a few years after they've had it, they're lucky if they got 2 million. Just look at the lottery winners. All you got to look at that. But put it in some kind of context, for President Trump to take 10 million and turn it into $1 billion, even if it were 100 million, it'd be like saying your father gave you 10 grand and you turned it into $100 million. I mean, you deserve a ton of credit. So this criticism, especially from people like Biden, who have never held a job, really is ridiculous. But Biden's competitors, back to the article, Biden's competitors might be keeping more punishing agendas than he is, according to this article. In other words, they're working harder, trying to convince as many voters as possible that they and only they can beat Trump, which is ultimately, I guess, the most important thing. But none of them yet have the poll number to show that their way is working better than Biden. And of course, we know that poll numbers are always right, right? Not. Ask Hillary Clinton. She was what, 90% guaranteed to win on election day. All right, we'll just keep you in touch with old creepy Uncle Joe and see how it goes. It's going to be interesting to see how I think the first debate is coming up sometime next month. So we'll see if Biden can continue to grow. He's not going to outwork the president, I can tell you that. All right, we're going to move on to an article from the Daily Republic. I don't think I've actually used this particular publication before, but it was interesting because it talks about the Supreme Court and how the Democrats are trying to make this their major issue for 2020. Democrats shifts to seize the Supreme Court as 2020 campaign issue. Democrats are attempting to turn the Supreme Court into a campaign issue as they confront President Donald Trump. Now, President Trump's done a yeoman's job at making the Supreme Court one of the centers of his campaign, both in his successful bid for president and coming up in 2020. I would imagine he will do the same. But Donald Trump's success at reshaping the federal judiciary with young conservative judges and the prospect that abortion rights are close to being eliminated. Boy, that's what they're like. You think the left, they've been given a gift, supposedly, by the state of Alabama and some other states. And we'll talk more about that as the article unfolds. I'm not so sure they're right, but I do get their point. But it says, the Dems, I mean, these are my words, the Dems are all about the court system. I mean, Buttigieg said this last night. He wants to pack the Supreme Court. He wants to put as many as like 15 on there. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. But these Democrats, they are focusing on the Supreme Court. But they've always focused on the Supreme Court. They just haven't done it very successfully. But according to this article, it's a shift after decades, talking about the Democratic Party's focus on the courts. It's a shift after decades of GOP candidates rallying their votes with promises to reshape the courts in a backlash to worn court rulings of the 1960s and Roe v. Wade in 1973, the landmark abortion rights ruling. The dynamic lasted through the 2016 election when Trump literally held out his list and said, hey, I'm going to appoint somebody on this list. Promises made, promises kept. That is radical, by the way. Maybe the Democrats ought to actually try that, and the Republicans as well. But this thing is all about abortion. I've said that during the Kavanaugh case, the Kavanaugh hearings before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I told you early on, if you were watching my show, that this has nothing to do with Kavanaugh the man. It's all about Roe versus Wade and the fear that one more vote on the Supreme Court, one more member on the bench was going to overturn that ruling. That is why they fought so nastily and so vehemently. It's all about abortion. And I'm not saying the entire Democratic Party feels this way, but they're hardcore activists, the ones that are running the show. Abortion is like their right. They have an absolute right to kill babies, and I don't see how you can disagree with that, especially about what's happened in the last year or so. The 2020 Democratic presidential contenders are increasingly bringing up the courts when addressing voters. They're egged on by activists still furious about Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's refusal to let President Barack Obama fill the open Supreme Court seat left by Scalia, the Garland seat, right? But that enabled Trump to solidify his 5-4 conservative majority. What they never talk about to you, we just talk about Joe Biden, is what gave Mitch McConnell kind of the foundation to do that. Kudos to him, by the way, for doing that, is the Biden rule. Joe Biden created this policy, if you will, and the Senate works on precedent more than about anything other than probably the court. Sorry about that. I got to get this air conditioning down more in the bunker. I'm hot about some of this stuff, so excuse me. But it's just because I bring passion to this thing, man. But the Biden rule, Joe Biden did this when he was chair of the Judiciary Committee. He's the one that set the precedent, which enabled Mitchell to actually carry this out. So they're always throwing this up, but they failed to mention, and it may come up in the presidential primary, that Biden actually gave the cover for the Republicans to do this. Focus on the courts was intensified this month with enactment of a law in Alabama, sweet home Alabama. Now, my mama's from Alabama. We celebrated her 98th birthday yesterday. Think about that. My mom turned 98 yesterday. I take personal privilege in saying that. That makes performing an abortion a felony in almost all cases. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, who is a woman, by the way, not a man trying to be a woman, but an actual woman, signed this into law. So to say that it's all white men is not true. Said the measure was aimed at forcing the Supreme Court to reconsider abortion rights. So it's a tactic. And President Trump even talked about they need exemptions for stuff like rape and incest. But there's a reason. We're not going to get too deep in it. Check it out. You'll see what I'm talking about. But this is a tactic to go before the Supreme Court. They're not denying this. Legislatures in other Republican-dominated states have passed or are considering abortion restrictions as conservatives see their first viable chance in a generation to overturn or sharply curtail Roe versus Wade. Now, I'm just throwing this out there for conversation. Please, hit me up on Facebook. You can put it in the comments section on like Citizens for Trump or my Facebook page, John Martin Talks. Check it out, or like Deplorable Resistance. If you want to message me directly, you can do so. But is it really about overturning Roe versus Wade? Now, I think quite a few people hope it is, but I'm more in the camp that it's trying to bring some type of sanity back to the abortion debate, because the left has gotten so far out there now, and we've talked about this on previous shows. Check out my podcast by going to John Martin Talks and my website, johnmartintalk.tv. Check it out. It's still being kind of reworked. But this craziness that like Governor Northam of Virginia put out there about making the baby comfortable before you kill it, and the celebration that Governor Cuomo had when he signed a very similar bill up in New York City, has actually pushed people back to the right and to the center, because very few Americans actually support late trimester abortions, let alone once the baby's born, actually killing it after that. It's only the hardcore progressive leftists that are actually for this. And every 2020 presidential candidate on the Democratic Party, including the moderate Joe Biden, has come down condemning all of these pro-life movements. So keep that in mind, you Democrats who might actually care about life. But I don't think this is as much about overturning Roe versus Wade. It could end up being that. I don't deny that. But it's more about returning some level of sanity, because the debate right now between making the baby comfortable or letting it live, that's a pretty insane place to be for the left. But they seem to be quite comfortable on it. But Kamala Harris, just to give you an example, said that if she's elected and nominates a Supreme Court nominee, respect for the precedent of Roe v. Wade would be a very significant factor. So in other words, a litmus test. Christian Gillibrand, the New York senator who is struggling to gain traction, I'll say, maybe she needs to get between Harvey Weinstein and Bill Clinton again, get her pumped up, is struggling to gain traction in the nomination contest, vowed to only nominate judges who will uphold Roe versus Wade. So the one thing that the left has consistently over the years criticized Republicans is having, quote, a litmus test for judges when they're just openly campaigning on a litmus test for judges. So, you know, the hypocrisy of the left knows no bounds. But Warren, Harris, Gillibrand, and Senator Spartacus, Cory Booker of New Jersey, as well as Beto O'Rourke and Pete Buttigieg have also indicated willingness to consider restructuring the Supreme Court. That's what I was talking about earlier. As a remedy to a conservative tilt, including adding seats or limiting the terms of justice. So let me ask you this. We're about to close out the show. Let me ask you this question. So the Democrats want to pack the court, overturn court rulings. I mean, that's always been about the courts for the Democrats. And Republicans over the years, certainly Trump, has done a better job at focusing on this than other Republicans and Democrats. And him and Mitch McConnell have done great work. So let me just give old Turtlehead Mitch McConnell some credit where credit is due. They've done some great work. But keep in mind that the current makeup, when I'm talking about current, I'm talking about the number 9 justices, including the head judge, has been in effect for over 150 years. Over 150 years, it's been establishment law. And it's worked pretty decently. I'm not agreed with all of it, but it's worked pretty good. But let me just ask you this. During that 150, I think it's actually almost 160 years, like 159 years. But during that over 150 years, which direction, led to a certain extent by the Supreme Court's rulings, has this country moved? Has it moved further to the left or further to the right? I think it's pretty clear that it is continuously, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but we have continuously slid towards the left, and the thing is, we're sliding faster and faster and faster. So we better pay attention to this. If you're a never-Trumper out there, but you're conservative, you better wake up. If you are a Democrat who doesn't want to see our country just slide off the cliff of socialism and go to basically killing babies after they're born, if that's something that concerns you, you better get woke to the real reality is, because the left has lost their mind. They want to push us to the point, I mean, how far after a baby's born can you abort it? I said my mom's 98 years old. Is no man or woman safe as long as their mama's alive? Should I be looking over my back or something like that? I don't know. But you better wake up and pay attention to this, because the Democrat Party has become the party of death. There is no doubt about it. It's not the party of JFK. It's the party of death. And I don't see how you can really argue that. Well, before I close out, let me just tell you quickly what I did this weekend. I mentioned it on Friday's show. I went down to the Republican Party of Florida, RPOF meetings, quarterly meetings in Sarasota. And I didn't live stream because it really didn't work too well down there, the type of meetings and stuff. But let me tell you, it was well attended. There are a lot of enthusiastic people for President Trump. And they're not just rah, rah, rah Trump, although there was plenty of that. There was more determination. What I see different this time around, I actually think bodes well for the president, is you see people that they're just taking for granted they're for Trump to a certain extent, and they're about how do we get it done. And the whole thing, I give credit to Chairman Joe Gruters, I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name, and our Vice Chair, Christian Ziegler. The whole focus of the meeting this week was how do we get it done? We're up against a lot of things, but they're working super hard, technologically wise. I'm not giving away any secrets. The Dems already know this, but the Trump administration is pumping millions of dollars into the infrastructure of the campaign, different than they did before. So I'm very encouraged. I hope you'll be encouraged. We got to make it happen. Not everybody can be a fighter, but we can all be supporters of fighters, and that's what I need you to do. Like and share what we're doing. Spread it far and wide. Thank you for your support. Thank you for tuning in. But above all else, as I say every day, from my heart, my family to yours, have a blessed day.